Welcome to CREPN Radio for influential commercial real estate professionals who work with investors, buyers, and sellers of commercial real estate coast to coast. Whether you're an investor, broker, lender, property manager, attorney, or accountant, we're here to learn from the experts.
Welcome to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CREPN Radio. We're so glad you could join us. My name's J. Darren Gross. I'm your host, and I'm a real estate investor and a commercial property insurance broker. I've been an insurance broker for 25 plus years, and my primary client base continues to be real estate professionals, investors, landlords, property managers, developers, design professionals, and lenders. Based on this, I'm continually looking for more information about real estate investing to share with my clients, to be a better resource for them, and also for my own investments. And that's how Commercial Real Estate Pro Network and CREPN Radio came about. I want you to know that if you have a real estate insurance question or you need any help, reach out to me. I'll do everything I can to help you. That's what I'm here for. We're so glad that you found us, and we hope that you'll enjoy what we're doing here and that you'll spread the word. You can find us, if you haven't already, you can find us, you can Google, you can look, we're on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. We've got a group on there, Twitter. We're on iTunes. No matter how you find us or how you found us, we hope that you'll like, share, follow. Let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. Your comments are greatly appreciated. Well, enough about us. Let's get on with this show. In today's show, we're going to get into flood insurance. And as I mentioned before, I'm an insurance broker. And in 25 plus years, I can tell you that I've never had a client come to me and say, Darren, I want to buy some flood insurance. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's usually something that's a surprise to them. It's something they learn at closing after they've invested a lot of time and effort. They're all ready to go. It's usually something that's understood at one of the last moments of a closing, that the lender says, hey, wait a minute, this property is in a floodplain. In order for us to fund your loan, we're going to need flood insurance. And keep in mind that a standard property insurance policy excludes flood. So that's where the tension comes from, is that you get your property policy for fire, theft, vandalism, and the exclusion is flood, and therefore you need a flood policy. And the surprise at closing, you're moving in a direction, all of a sudden you've got this new issue. Flood insurance, if you need it, is usually expensive. And until now, the only way I knew about reducing or eliminating the need for flood insurance was to hire a surveyor, have them go out and provide do a survey and provide a certificate, an elevation certificate that then you would provide us, and we take it back through the flood insurance company, and over a very clunky process, which most people didn't know what they were doing. If we were lucky, we might be able to get your requirement reduced or eliminated, but it was not exactly a smooth system. And to make matters worse, recently, and I think it was back in 2012 or 2013, that the whole flood insurance program was required that it be updated. So what's been going on is they have been updating the maps, and in the process of updating the maps, many properties that were previously above the floodplain have all of a sudden been determined to be in the floodplain, creating a problem that properties that previously didn't have to have flood insurance are now forced to purchase flood insurance. So based on all of this, I was delighted when I found our guest today, and I'm delighted to bring to you my interview with Steve Gill of Flood Risk America. All right, this morning we are going to jump into the topic of flood insurance, flood maps, flood zones, not fun zones, flood zones. And to do that and to get some greater perspective and talk just about what it all means. So I've got my guest today is Steve Gill. Steve Gill is the founder and executive partner of Flood Risk Canada and Flood Risk America. And Steve, welcome to the program.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
We're glad to have you on the line. And Steve, I'm just curious. I know we've talked. Whereabouts are you calling from today?
We're based out of Orlando, Florida area, and also Lake Worth, Florida. But we work nationwide, and we have an office also in Oakville, Ontario, which is just north of Toronto.
Got it. Well, I've definitely the Orlando Disney had that experience. I love Florida. So, Steve, do me a favor, and for our listeners, if you could tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started with Flood Risk America and Flood Risk Canada, and kind of what you guys do.
Sure. I had a friend that originally was an engineer with FEMA, and he was a contractor of FEMA, and he always had questions on the work that was being done on the data of the old maps and the elevations of the properties and how FEMA was determining the base flood elevation where a property lies in the flood zone. And he came to me and said, hey, there's a lot of error being done, and the work is being half done. It's not being corrected. It's up to the property owner to correct that information. And so he came up with an idea with a formula that we go to the commercial real estate industry and we audit their flood policies and confirm the true flood zone. Are they being rated in the most favorable manner? And through our experience, we went to large, commercial real estate, small commercial real estate, residential, nursing homes, anybody that owns real estate. And we audited their flood policies and found that about 50 to 60% of them had errors, and that they could have been getting the coverage either for 80% cheaper or being rated more favorable with lower flood deductibles and better flood coverages. And that led to, us just expanding ourselves through the U.S., and our pricing model was based on, for every dollar we save you, we take 50 cents for the current year only. So it was a contingency fee basis where we provided our service with no cost to the property owner, that we did our flood analysis for free. We came up with the results, presented it back to the property owner, and said, here's what we can save you. And they said, this is great. I love this idea. You can save me money going forward. And they all took advantage of it. So, the average client, we save about 85% on their flood insurance, which is, pretty good, great deliverable. We've saved some clients have $500,000 in premium a year, which is great. And then they get lower deductibles and better coverages on the other end. And we work with FEMA to correct the errors. We work with the lenders to remove the lender requirements. And sometimes when there's a forced place policy, when the lender's asking you to buy a flood policy, our service is offset with a refund due to FEMA has a rule in the manual that says if we placed you in the flood zone and that you are incorrectly in the flood zone, we'll give you your premium back if you provide us, if we get a LOMA for the property, which is a letter of map amendment.
Wow, that's a lot of information there. I mean, the savings, the 50 to 60% error rate, 80 to 85% average savings. That's pretty significant. I'm sure any property owner that's in a flood zone that's had had to buy flood insurance is definitely interested in talking with you and having you take a look.
Certainly. And, we work for condominiums as well. We work for anybody that has a property. There are different parts of the country have different problems. California has problems with levees that are being decertified. They're putting you in the flood zone because of lack of maintenance. And that's nationwide. So there's many different parts of the country that have different problems. And Florida has coastal issues with hurricane rains, and other areas just have river flooding. So, we look at every source of flooding for that property.
Got it. So if we could, let's back up here just a little bit and kind of jump into what is flood? How is it determined that you need or that you're in a flood zone? And, what are the governing principles that do all this? And a little bit, I know I am an insurance broker and have dealt with this firsthand, so I want to give a little bit of my perspective on this. And typically what I see is it's not something that people are coming to me saying, hey, I want to buy a flood insurance. It's usually something that they're marching down the path. They're on whether it's a dream property or an investment property they're all excited about, and they get up to the closing, and it's at closing they find out, what? We got a flood insurance? And that's when the story starts to, prevail or present itself, and it can be an unexpected cost. It can be an expensive cost. And so I think maybe what would be helpful is to talk a little bit about who the parties are that are, determining that you're in this flood zone. And so maybe can you speak a little bit about FEMA and the maps and the zones and all that fun stuff?
Sure. FEMA obviously they do a great job at mapping the country. I mean, they do, the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance, is a great program. We're fortunate to have it. And they do a very good job in running it. But fortunately, there is some error. And we basically, when they confirm that you're in a flood zone based on their maps, which have inaccuracy on them and the elevations, the old paper maps is what they used, 20-some years ago. Now they're using LiDAR that is basically a plane they fly over, and it's a laser beam that's shot down that gives them the elevations of the elevations of the land, the topography as it flies. So basically, it looks for low points of elevation, and then they create a base flood elevation for that area, a BFE, which you'd see on an elevation certificate or something that your broker may talk about or a surveyor. And if water is going to ponder on your property, they consider you to be in the high-risk flood zone. So you would be in an A zone, an AE, an AH, an AO, or that would be meaning that they considered a 100-year storm, which is 12 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. That would ponder on your property, and if you have that ponding on your property, FEMA says you're basically in a flood zone, and that's how they model it. Now, the coastal areas are a VE flood zone. When you're living on the coast, where you're getting wave action to your property, meaning that if it's, they can get all different waves, you can actually be out of a flood zone and being on a coastline, depending on, what it is. They take into credit the frontal dune, how far are you from the ocean, and that's where a very high-risk flood zone is as well. The highest risk flood zone is a VE, and anything starting with an A is a high-risk flood zone. They assume that other properties are in an X zone, which is geographically out of a flood zone, meaning that you're in a 12 inches of rain, that water will not ponder on your property. It'll go towards the AE properties. So that's how FEMA confirms you're in the flood zone. And when they prove that you're in the flood zone and you go to get a mortgage or go to get a refi, the lenders are forced by federal legislation to force you to buy flood insurance. The lenders are not trying to be the mean guy to say, hey, we want, and they make money on it. It's not the case at all. They're just auditing and protecting the asset that you're compliant with your loan and you're buying flood insurance, and the rating is based on the elevation of the property and how well your property was built and constructed.
Got it. And in that the FEMA and the mapping and all that, if I understand right, and this is where I think some of the recent issues have come from, is that like in 2013, I think it was, that FEMA went back through, and was it that LiDAR system you mentioned that they've started using that's caused some havoc, and I guess not necessarily just havoc. I mean, it's gone back and kind of audited their information and found that possibly some properties, and it seems like, maybe you can speak to this, they're possibly, I guess they're looking at the information they're getting and they're assuming the worst case scenario. So if I have an example I can think of specifically, I had a client that bought a property, and on the property there was a creek that ran through it, which was naturally a low point, but the structure was nowhere near the creek. But because that creek was on the property and the elevation of that was clearly a flood plain, they assumed that the structure was in harm's way. And the the buyer was forced to buy the flood insurance, knowing full well that he was well above it. Is that kind of consistent with what you're seeing with the redo on the maps?
Yes, that is correct. That's exactly what's going on. There is some error in them, but they're more accurate than the old style. Pretty much around the world, that's what they're using, the LiDAR, for making flood maps. So it is the latest technology that the government's using, and there is some error in it. I think if they say down to an inch, I heard on the paper maps there was up to 2 feet error. So the LiDAR is the latest technology. They believe in it. They're standing behind it. But there is some error on geographically, even where a building is placed on the flood map. So, a lot of error goes on because the information and the data is not done by surveyors or engineers. It's done by people that are just selling the information, and it gets resold, and people misrepresent what's actually happening. So the banks get this information because everybody has their own source to get the flood, whether you're in the flood zone. Each lender, each insurance broker use a flood determination system that tells you whether you're in a flood zone or whether you're not, and that's what they go by. And those can be challenged, and that's what we do. We come in and we would challenge that because we challenge geographically. We know the building could be in the flood zone, but was it built in a flood-safe manner? If it was, it's removed from the flood zone based on elevation, meaning it was built in a flood-safe manner at the time of construction. They're in compliance with the FEMA manual, and FEMA will give them a LOMA, which removes the lender requirement and removes you from buying flood insurance. So in a 100-year flood, 12 inches of rain, when that happens, or if that stream overflows on more into your grass, into your yard, that you're not going to flood. That water's not going to enter the first floor or create a flood claim in your property. We're not saying water will be on your property, but not entering your first floor where you're going to hit drywall, carpet, and something's going to get damaged. And then there's the other error where it's made where geographically where the building is placed on the flood map, meaning that it's actually, the lender says it's in the flood zone based on old data because they haven't updated the map, and the new map says, no, it's no longer in a flood zone, and it's just bad information done by somebody that misplaced that building on the flood map. Where we would come in, we basically find the building based on the latitude and longitude. People use where you have multiple addresses for multifamily properties where you've got, the main clubhouse and then you've got 15 other buildings. So they run a flood determination on the clubhouse and say, okay, the clubhouse is in the flood zone, and they assume the rest of all the other buildings are in the flood zone, which could be incorrect. So the guy could be forced by flood insurance on all 16 buildings where only 2 of them could be in the flood zone. And so it's kind of like a duplicate coverage where he really should be getting that coverage for free on a large real estate. Most large real estate people get that coverage for free on their master policy when they're not in the flood zone, and that's the error we correct. So we can correct it geographically, or we can remove it based on elevation as well.
Well, that is. I'm sitting there listening, and that's significant, and that's exactly the situation. I'm thinking of another situation. I just remembered that there's a condominium property, like you mentioned, that has a creek that runs along the property, and I want to say there's like a carport or something like that that's in a low-lying area, but the rest of the property they're forced to buy this flood insurance. I'll have to put them in touch with you. I wanted to. What's that?
You can actually we've had condominiums on the water that, like the pool, and where the pool is not connected to the building, it's joined by a joint slab in the building, where the pool's in the flood zone in the high risk and the building's in the low risk. And they were forced to buy high-risk flood policy because the pool was in. The pool is not even insured on the flood insurance policy. So basically what we did is we removed the building from the flood zone just based on geographic because the building was never in the flood zone, and they got a lower deductible and saved $120,000 a year. It's quite interesting. It's amazing, and that's the type of error we're talking about with condos and just the geographic location of the flood zone.
Wow. And you say that your experience is you see these maps incorrect as much as 50%. Was that what I heard?
That is correct. Yes. The error can be right because the error that the lender, the flood determination people, that the industry that works for obviously they're selling the data, they're running your address, and they're confirming whether you're in the flood zone or not. Their information could be 3 years old, Darren. And when that happens is that data they're using, the lender is going to say, well, our guy's right, and then the insurance broker runs a flood determination, or the carrier says, no, it's not, because we're using more updated information. The lender's going to stand by their guns and say, no, you're going to buy a flood policy. So that's where, we come in, we mediate that to FEMA, we take it to FEMA, FEMA confirms its geographic location, not in the flood zone, and then the lender accepts and says, oh, you know what, we're incorrect, perfect, that's great, we'll remove the lender requirement. It's just, some people are not using the updated flood maps, and they don't update it because they just, so many addresses in the U.S., who has time to update it, and also cost. So that's where a lot of error is made.
Right. No, and I was just, the whole error thing. I know in the one case that I'm familiar with, the options for the property owner were to hire a surveyor to come out to the property and do the elevation certificates, because the elevation certificate is essentially what I've been made aware of is what was needed in order to present to, and I assume then that gets fed back through FEMA, or is FEMA the ultimate governing body on who says you are or you are not in a flood zone?
Yes, that is correct. They're the governing body of whether you're in or whether you're out of the flood zone. The elevation certificate is used to remove the structure based on elevation. And if you're out of the flood zone geographically, meaning your building's not even near a flood zone, you're just based on a map, and a good surveyor or engineer can sign off on a document saying, like us, we would sign off and say, here's the building, here's where it is on the flood map, not over there. And then FEMA would agree with us and give us an out-of-show Loma geographically, so it's not based on elevation, it's based on the location of where the property is located.
All right. And then the difference, and I guess would be like a surveyor, they're going to charge their fee, whereas you base yours based on the savings they're going to naturally experience on a contingency basis. So.
Yeah, that's correct. We have surveyors nationwide that work with us, and the average elevation certificate can range anywhere from $300 to $700 to $800 per building, depending. The more elevated the land, the higher the expense for the elevation, because they have to calculate the base flood elevation. So when it's flat like Florida, it's very cheap. The south is normally cheaper than the north. The California is very expensive because it's very mountainous, and there's a lot of work, a lot of math going in when they calculate the base flood elevation, the highest adjacent grades, and the lowest adjacent being the lowest floor elevations and the elevations around the building. So it's very time consuming when you have to do all those calculations.
Got it. And just to kind of back up here just one second, the 100-year floodplain you expressed as the likelihood to flood within a 24-hour period of 12 inches of rain. Is that what they?
Yeah, that's the model they use in the United States. That is correct. And most of the world uses a 100 years flood, which is 12 inches, 24-hour period. Florida gets that all the time, 12 inches of rain in hurricane rains, and the construction was designed to handle. We've had 24 inches of rain, and some properties flood and some do not because they're well constructed. They built flood safe, and others wish not to. So those are the ones that flood.
Got it. And in that, the code now, so if you got that 100-year floodplain level, what is the actual distance that they look for that first floor? And there's like some sort of a the finished first floor, or I don't know. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, the finished floor elevation is basically how FEMA looks at it. Is based if you're built flood safe. The terminology is that, let's just say the base flood elevation is 8. That's meaning where the water will ponder around your property in a 100-year storm. So that is where your property all the rain will ponder in your driveway, next to your front door. So if your finished floor elevation is 8 or greater, you will get a LOMA, meaning FEMA said, hey, you built flood safe, your floor is elevated, you're not going to get, water's not going to enter your first floor elevation or your building and create a flood claim. And if you're, like a 7, that means you're a -1. So meaning that when that base flood elevation comes in to 12 inches of rain, that means that 1 foot of water could enter your structure and create a very large flood claim for you. So to get permits today, you have to build above the base flood elevation or greater, equal or greater than that base flood elevation, and that means you're building flood safe. Most communities now ask for a 1 foot freeboard, like the state of Florida. They have, so if your base flood elevation is 8, they make you start the first floor elevation at 9. which is 12 inches. So, I mean, the building will really never flood. I mean, it's just, unless they, get hit with a wave or something, but those are the kind of the math formula they use, and that means your building flood compliant. And so that means you're out of the flood zone based on elevation, even if your property is in a flood zone. So people have the idea when I remove a property from the flood zone, when you go to based on elevation, you're removing the building from the flood zone, not the property. But and when we do a LOMA, so when a property owner gets a LOMA, when we obtain that for that property and you sell that property, it transfers with the property as well. So when you sell the property and the new owner comes in and he goes to closing and the lender says, "Oh, you're in a flood zone, you got to have a flood insurance," you would present that LOMA, letter of map amendment, to the lender, and then they will in turn go, "Oh, great, you're out of the flood zone." Then they'll supersede to proceed with the closing of the loan without you buying flood insurance. It's kind of how it works.
So is the LOMA then, does that get recorded on the FEMA map, or is that just a piece of paper that you keep in your possession?
That's a piece of paper that goes with the address of the property based on its address, and then also based on its latitude and longitude, which is in the FEMA library that's available to the public. So basically, if you're buying a property, you can go to the FEMA website and check and see if your property, if somebody did a LOMA prior years. Or they come invalid. They can be invalid if the new flood maps takes place. You have to resubmit it for an updated LOMA to update to kind of reiterate it so that they basically update it so that they confirm you haven't done any construction around your property. And it only goes void when they put a new flood map in the area, which is usually about every 15 to 20 years they redo the flood maps. That's what's been going on in the past. So we've had, LOMAs that are on properties prior where the map has changed, and FEMA wants you to resend your case in based on the elevations again, and they confirm and they revalidate the LOMA. So then it's good for another how many years until they remap you. And that's the document that you would present to your lender. It's a public document. It shows the property address. Sometimes it has names of the property on it, but very rare. It usually has the addresses. And then if you have multiple buildings, it'll show each building address that's out of the flood zone has been removed by FEMA.
Well, that's, it's fascinating to me, just from A to Z here, how we've gone from the system to the errors to the higher tech and the ongoing updating of the maps. And then you've been able to segment and point to the right answer, in that if you're faced with a situation that you're required to buy flood insurance, you're able to go and show that this structure is not, or at least not all the structures are, and create some savings for people. That's great.
Yeah, people, they got the impression that you cannot challenge FEMA, and you can, and this is what we do. You can challenge anything you wish. Just because somebody's telling you you're in a flood zone, it doesn't always mean it's correct. And that's what most people, property owners, think. They think, because my lender's telling me it must be correct, or my insurance broker's telling me it must be correct. And sometimes it is. Most times it is correct. But, there is that moment that they make error, and we can correct that. So you can challenge government, and that's why FEMA does that program, because they know that some people build incompliant to their manual and say, hey, we don't want to flood, and we want to build our property in a flood safe manner, but we still may buy a flood policy based on out of the flood zone policy at quarter of the price that they're paying versus being in the flood zone. So there's we sometimes recommend people buy flood policies. Sometimes we make recommendations not to, based on your elevation, based on your geographic location. So property owners do ask us and say, hey, should I buy flood insurance or should I not? And we give them our advice and say, hey, this is what I would do if I owned the property. And if it's in, sometimes it's in. It is. They don't want to hear that, but sometimes you have to deliver the bad news that your property is in a flood zone. You got to buy a flood policy, and the ones that love it that hear that they're not, and they don't have to. They can remove that. It's great news too.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking more in that's the conversation people want to have, not the what? Steve, I hired you to tell me no, I don't need flood insurance.
I work a lot of lenders, a lot of developers, lenders and stuff, and they ask us for advice because sometimes they just don't have the resources that we have, the engineering and the modeling to do the proper analysis. So we get involved and we do our analysis for free for them. I mean, it's a free, and we let them know, and then if they hire us to change it, correct it, that's when our fee takes place, and it's based on savings always. I have builders that I work for in Miami and around the country in Atlantic City that construct properties, and they're forced to buy a flood policy at the time of construction, and they get they're very upset with it because why am I buying flood insurance on a building that's not even built? So, because then sometimes these guys can be paying $30,000, $40,000 for a flood premium on a building that's not even constructed. It's just dirt, and we know nothing's going to happen to dirt and flood. So, that's where we really help a lot of builders, developers that are having the problems and just don't have the time to deal with these lenders or don't have the time to understand the legislation and their rights. And that's where we come in and say, hey, let us do the work for you. You got other things to worry about. We'll take care of the flood issue.
No, that's beautiful, and I'm sure any developer would love to know that they're not in the situation of needing flood insurance. So I'm going down my list of things I'd kind of jotted down, questions I was wanting to ask you. The ideal somebody that's interested in contacting you. I mean, it sounds to me like anybody that's suspect to or been put in the position to buy flood insurance is an excellent opportunity to reach out to you to see if they can't save some money. Am I reading that right?
Please, yes. I'd love to do, even if they've got to call us, email us. Usually the best way is email. Our website's available, which is floodriskamerica.com. And they can contact us and they can call us and, whatever information they need, it's all free. The analysis, the information, we like to provide a library of flood information and education about flood. And, and at some point, a lot of people they know somebody or they have a friend or they're a builder or they're buying a property that's in the flood zone and they call you back. They go, this guy knew his stuff and let's call him. So we are available pretty much 24/7 to give recommendation on about flood, about buying it or selling, basically, whether you should, whether you shouldn't, should you submit a case to FEMA. And our pricing's very, we're very reasonable in our pricing. It's been a model that's been used and been successful. And people after we deliver our service are very, very happy with it. We've never had a problem ever not getting paid because we deliverable item to them that is a saving going forward. It's a better coverages and whether you're buying a premium or not. And some of them, we tell them, hey, there's no reason to buy this flood policy. Don't need to. Take the money and put it towards something else because you got duplicate coverage, So it's pointless to have that because, if you're never going to flood, why buy a flood policy? Buy a wind policy or a fire policy or something where you're going to need it in your insurance. That's what we recommend. Yeah,
no doubt. Nobody wants to buy insurance when they don't need it, especially when it's put upon them that they have to have it. Trust me, I know that. Before we wrap up here, why don't you tell the listeners here a little bit about your promotion for listeners, anybody wanting to take advantage of your service?
Sure, yeah. Our offer is basically, it's whenever they wish to call or it's open to anybody, there's no closing on it, is basically that we will give 20% off our analysis fee for when we're successful. The analysis is free. Basically, if we find a saving for you, we'll give you a 20% discount on our services, period. So obviously that if we do a flood analysis for free and we come back and find savings, that meaning that instead of a 50%, we'll take 30% of the savings. So you basically keep 70%, and which is a very good offer, and it's a contingent agreement. So if we're successful, we get paid 30% of your savings. If we're not, we get nothing, which is very unique. So, and then we also, it's a peace of mind for the owner. Sometimes we bring back the flood analysis report and we say, hey, you're in the flood zone. You know your situation. There's no reason to challenge it and look any further. It's, sometimes it's not good news and it is what it is. And there's no reason to question it. And that's a peace of mind for a property owner too. Saying, am I incorrect? Am I not? This way it's an actual audit that's 100% accurate. It's done by an engineer or a surveyor. Through our company, nothing is outsourced, and we duplicate everything. We double check everything just to make sure that the geographic our answers are correct. So it's that 20%. We basically can allow the 20% deliverable to the client for the savings.
Oh, that's great. And so for our listeners, too, there's a link in the show notes. If you click on that, that'll take you to the discount code, and you can reach out to Steve, and he'll set you up with that. And Steve, we thank you very much for offering that and providing that to our listeners. Beyond that, is there anything that you feel like we should have covered that we didn't, or that you would have liked to got a little longer on?
There is property owners that, say, oh, I am in a flood zone. And there's things you can do to prevent flood loss as well, that we have solutions, flood vents. We helped the building that was in Atlantic City that was in the flood zone. They had flood prior, but their floodplain was very high. But we came in and we did some flood vents. We did some flood proofing, whether it's dry and wet, and it reduced the premium by $80,000 for the exact same coverage, same broker, same carrier, under the NFIP. So there's other things. Just because your building's in a flood zone, it doesn't mean you cannot improve your situation. So there is proactive things that you can do to improve the building from flooding, or eliminating the loss and minimizing your flood loss, that FEMA gives you credits for. And we can help you with those credits and help you educate you and provide you with that data as well. It's very cost effective. Flood vents are usually about $300-400 per. They represent about 1,200 square feet. It's installed by a contractor, and it's usually maybe the client that we did work for. They spent around $1,800, but they saved, as I say, I think it was in the saving of $70,000-80,000. So, and they were like overwhelmed with the saving. They couldn't believe it. It's just almost it. But there is savings out there for buildings that are in the flood zone that you can do to build, to construct and buy products flood safe, move things, to the next higher floor, or flood proof your basement by, using, and as I say, the expenses are not that bad. It's very reasonable. If you're spending a lot of money on flood insurance, it's certainly worth looking into, to having a professional see, hey, is there something I can do to get rid of and lower my premium? So there is solutions.
Yeah, I think anybody that's buying flood insurance is not happy about it, and if you could help reduce that cost, that would certainly be something to make their day, and especially if it's something an ongoing savings. I think that's the the one that makes everybody smile. You have you're not only are you saving in year one by engaging your services, but the savings are ongoing, and they know they have the protection if they need it. Sounds great.
Right.
Great. Well, Steve, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today, and I've learned a lot, and look forward to staying in touch with you and referring some people to you. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you and Flood Risk America or Flood Risk Canada?
Usually by email is the best way, Darren. It's my email address is sgill@floodriskamerica.com, and they can reply to me through email. They can go to the website, which is floodriskamerica.com, and all the information's there. They can contact us. We're available pretty much 24/7 because we do a lot of. Somebody always, sometimes at midnight we don't answer, but we do a lot of flood relief situations, flood emergency stuff, situation planning for people. So we're always available. But the best probably way would be through our website or my email address, which again is sgill, SGILL, @floodriskamerica.com.
All right. Well, Steve, I thank you so much again for taking the time and sharing all this great information. And I'm sure anybody that's in a flood zone or buying flood insurance is going to greatly appreciate this information as well.
I appreciate the opportunity. And as I say, even if they just have questions there, they're more than welcome to call me. We're available for them. You don't necessarily need to do a reclassification with us. If you have questions regarding flooding, call us. We're available, or email us, and we'll be more than happy to answer anything for free for you. Just give you the knowledge and the education about flood. That's what we like to do.
That's great.
We also work, just so you know, we work nationwide. Michigan from Hawaii to all to Maine. So we work in every state. We're licensed in every state in the nation. So just because you're somewhere in the country and we're in Florida, we can help you. We can help you. And we've worked in every state in the country. We worked in Hawaii. We worked pretty much everywhere. And, we're now doing work in Canada, which is great.
That's great. Well, Steve, again, I thank you, and if you're agreeable, I'd love to reach out to you again soon and continue this conversation, because I think it's something that it's certainly a growing situation. I know a lot of people are getting put into the flood zone based on the redo of the maps, and
Right.
this is information that they can certainly value, having and using, and it'd be good to reconnect.
Right. Well, and I'm available, as I say. I appreciate the opportunity, and love to help any property owner or anybody with flood information that needs answers.
All right. Well, thank you, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Have a good day.
Well, there you go. There was the interview with Steve Gill of Flood Risk America. I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you or somebody you know has a property in a flood zone and is paying for flood insurance, I sure hope you'll pass this along to them, or you'll reach out and make use of the services that Flood Risk America has to offer, because as Steve pointed out, it's a no cost to consult with them. The way they make their fee is if they find out they can save you money, their fee is half of what your savings is the first year, and that's it, and then you're done. And be sure to check out the link in the show notes, because Steve's also provided a 20% discount off of their services. And so, it's a win-win-win. So hopefully you're not in flood zone, but if you are, I guarantee you this is something you want to check out. Let's see what else we got here. So again, we want to make sure that if you are listening and you like what you hear here, what we're doing here at CREPN Radio, that you'll like us, you'll share, you'll follow. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And let's see what else. So also with if you have any kind of insurance questions, or you have some issues you need help on, please reach out to me. That's what I do. I mean, that is exactly what I do, and the why I'm doing this is so that I can reach out to more people that have insurance needs, and we can try and be there and help them through that. So with that, until next time, thanks for listening to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CREPN Radio.
You're listening to CREPN Radio for influential commercial real estate professionals. For more information on this or any of our guests, like us on Facebook, CREPN Radio.